What's going on, folks? This is Colion Noir. It's another episode of CM Live. Before we get into the show, kind of just want to do some rambling about some things that have happened over the past couple of days. Recently, I got into a little spat with one of the, I wouldn't call her a founder, one of the figureheads. She represents the epitome of everything that is anti-gun in this country. And she goes by the name of Shannon Watts. And I had a little back and forth with her on Twitter. And what was interesting was kind of a lot of people's reaction to our back and forth. Initially, I got some pushback from some people who were saying, why do I even entertain people like her? Because it's pretty blatant and apparent that she doesn't want to have a conversation or a rational conversation about the issue of guns in this country. And I get that. And in some ways, I'm not even going to lie and tell you that I don't have a little bit of troll inside of me. But nonetheless, I do think it's important that we do our best to kind of counter and knock the anti-gun rhetoric that's being put out there, because what ends up happening is when you allow the false information that's being put out there to live in its space, somebody's going to consume it. It's not just going to sit out there by itself. Someone's going to take that information and then use that information as if it's the gospel, especially when you don't have anything to contrast it against. And so when I engage somebody like Shannon Watts on Twitter, I'm not really worried about talking to her as much as I am talking to the people in the middle. At one point, she proceeded to tweet out a bunch of tweets about why the NRA is responsible for a lot of the gun violence in this country, or why are they responsible for stopping a lot of the gun control measures in this country. And I think a lot of us forget that we're involved in this conversation on a pretty regular basis. There are a lot of people who aren't, and they come into this conversation in the middle at some point where they don't really know what's going on. And when they come in and they hear words like reasonable gun measures or background checks, why don't we have background checks? They don't know that we've had background checks for the longest. Like, we've had the NICS program for ages now. But to them, they're assuming, well, I don't know very much about guns, and I would have assumed we would have had some type of background checks. But when you hear the rhetoric from someone like Shannon Watts telling them that there is no background checks, well, then they digest that and they take it in and then believe it to be true. So when you have somebody like me who goes back and forth with her and encounters that narrative, if anything, it forces them to start to think. It forces them to start to realize, okay, maybe I am getting one side of this issue and not the other. And so that's why I think it's important to engage people to a degree, even when we think that it's futile in getting them to change the way that they perceive the topic that we're discussing. With that being said, one of the things I didn't notice about Shannon Watts and the way that she engaged me, which was interesting, was it's I don't understand how people can honestly fall for it. That's a sad thing, because we're talking about a woman who obviously really doesn't know what she's talking about. They even tried to blame me for putting out fake news and then tried to criticize me for having a fake name as if that somehow invalidated me, even though I've been doing this for over 10 years now. So it's just interesting to see the dynamic of the other side and how they play the game. Now, the one thing that we have to do in balance and understand is that we're dealing with wolves. We're not dealing with people who are adamantly, purely looking out for the best interest of this country. And as much as they like to put on that, as much as they like to put on that cheap clothing and make it seem like, well, we're just worried about protecting and saving lives, they're not. There's an agenda there, and it's an agenda that we need to smash, and it's an agenda that we need to do away with in many ways when it comes to dealing with other people. And one of the best ways to do this is to engage people online. I think there is some benefit to that, even though a lot of it tends to just be a bunch of back and forth between people yelling and screaming, trying to prove the one person wrong and trying to make the other person look stupid or stump the other person. The one thing that I will say is this: when you do engage people like this, understand that there's an audience. Your audience is not the person you're talking to. The audience are the people who are watching this conversation take place. So let's say you're at a family function and you're talking and you get challenged as to why we need this many guns in this country. Why do we don't have these gun control measures in this country? At that point, this person is challenging you, but it's not really your job to get to convince them. Your job is to convince the people in the middle, because they don't have an agenda. The person who you're talking to or conversing with or going back and forth with, they have an agenda. They've already made up in their minds what they believe. And from that perspective, you may be able to change their mind, but in many ways, the real goal is to talk to the people who are in the middle watching this dialogue go back and forth. And so you need to understand that. And the best way to do that is to hit them with facts. Facts, facts, facts. We can do hypotheticals all day long, but we have to remember that the facts are on our side. The problem is that they have a platform, and then you have people funding these organizations and dumping tons of money into these organizations to put out this information, this false information, to get people to believe one way and make it seem like these facts are actually valid. And then you have us. And right now we have a loud voice. We have a great platform that's been afforded to us by way of the internet, because I think, but for the internet, we wouldn't be in a position that we are now, because we wouldn't have the voices that we have to go out there and spread the information that is being spread. So from that perspective, we need to understand that we've got to be on top of our game in terms of the facts, because people understand facts. And then on top of that, you've got to take people and put them in the position and have them understand what reality is like. I think for a lot of people, when they think about the gun rights issue, in their mind, everything is hypothetical and lives in this weird vacuum. The idea that, and the perfect example of that are gun-free zones. When you look at gun-free zones, like especially when we talk about the most recent shooting that happened in Florida, everyone's talking about, wait a minute, he was able to get the gun out of his bag, the gun that he checked into the airport, and he was able to get into his bag, pull it out, and just start shooting. Their initial reaction is going to be, well, why is he allowed to do that? Not realizing that, guess what? Anybody could drive right up to the airport, grab a gun, get out of their car, and do the exact same thing without having to pull it out of their bag coming off of a flight. But it's what I call the elusive obvious. It's things that make a lot of sense once you learn about them, but then at some point you realize, oh, wow, okay, maybe I looked at this the wrong way. And so from that perspective, it's very important to understand that who the audience is. And your audience, when you're talking guns with people who don't agree with you on the issue, are largely people who are blank slates. They don't have much in the way of information about guns, and therefore it is your job to inform them if you are having a conversation about it with somebody else who's trying to disprove your point. So just wanted to put that out there for you guys. And that being said, I'm going to go on to our first guest. Is somebody who I've had on my show, Noir, before. And I got to say, seeing what he's able to do in person, watching it online does nothing. Being able to see it in person actually is incredible, and it's a whole nother experience in and of itself. This is an individual who I'm immensely jealous of, because he has a capability that I don't think I'll ever be able to reach. But nonetheless, I admire him and I have much respect for him. And I want to thank Jerry Miculek for joining us here today. What's going on, Jerry?
Oh, it's good to be here. I was just out on the range shooting a little bit as usual, so I had to burn some ammo up.
See, I'm out. See, it's like, you do so much shooting and like I said, it's hard to balance admiring somebody so much and then being jealous of them on the same level. So, what were you shooting today?
I was doing some rapid fire modern sporting rifle drills.
Okay,
we got a record attempt coming up, so trying to get the finger excited. Did some rapid fire pistol drills. So,
what's the record attempt? Are you able to share that?
What I'm trying to do is to set some new standards and make it as a record. So I'm going to document everything. It's going to have a laser start, so you don't jump the clock.
Yeah.
It's going to be 3 targets. Furthest is 5 yards. It's going to be a standard USPSA, what they call a metric target.
Gotcha.
It has 2 A zones, lower and upper. Put 4 there, 2 on top, 2 on a target 3 foot to the right, and then a target 3 foot to the left. So it's a 10-shot drill with reaction time.
Wow.
So it's kind of a trick.
So usually, how long does it usually take you for you to get to the point where you're like, okay, I think I can actually pull this off? Or does it vary depending on the actual trick?
What's really fun about training for these things that usually I don't really do them well in practice. but the adrenaline of the crowd,
gotcha,
really clicks it up another notch, and you get to that next level, and it's a fun ride. That's exciting.
So you rise to the occasion under pressure. You're one of those types.
Right. Yeah. Gotcha. Try to. Right.
I used to tell myself that in law school. Really, it was just an excuse to procrastinate. Tell myself, no, I do better under pressure. I'll study last minute. That's when I do my best studying. But let's talk about the genesis of how you got to be where you are now. How did you get into shooting initially?
Well, when I was young, I had a pellet gun. Everybody had a pellet gun, so we went out and shot BB guns and pellet guns, and we used to hunt a lot. So when hunting season would wind down, you stuck there and you're not making any noise. So my buddy and I that I grew up with, we always had 22 rifles. So we started aerial strict shooting and all kind of stuff like this, and it just kind of grew. Every weekend we'd show up, we'd find ourselves in the same location with a carton of bullets and a 22 rifle, and let's say, what we're going to do with it. So we invent games to play, and really had a good time with it. So it just kind of kept going to the next level. So just fun, just having fun.
Now I have to ask you, a lot of people always talk about when people start shooting, to start them off small, start them off with the 22 and then kind of gradually progress up. Do you think that you would have been negatively affected if you started off with, say, a higher caliber other than the 22? And I know it was such a long time ago, but
well, thank you.
well, I mean, in the sense that you are no longer a child.
Right. I can tell you my experience when I bought really my first centerfire handgun. I bought a 44 Magnum.
Oh, wow.
And it was way too much horsepower. I couldn't hit that. So, but just the experience. But I would recommend always, like we started with BB guns.
Gotcha.
So you learn from there. You just kind of take it a step at a time, and you just progress from there. You gotta start. Big guns make for big recoil and a lot of noise, so you get flinched right off the bat. And then the learning curve is not fun.
Gotcha.
So we were fortunate enough to start on the bottom rung, with BB guns, and it's a great place to start.
Yeah.
What's interesting about BB guns, back during Vietnam, Daisy BB gun used to sell a gun to the military called the Quick Kill program. And they also sold it to the civilian market as quick skill. And it was a little cheap BB gun with no sights. And you learn how to point shoot. They had a little plastic set of discs. One guy would throw it on the ground, you'd roll it, and the other guy would shoot, or you'd throw it in the sky and you shoot at it. And that was the build up, just the fundamentals of point shooting, how to mount quickly, things of that nature. So a lot can be learned from BB guns.
Oh, wow. Okay. So we're going to take a quick break, and then when we come back, I want to talk a little bit more about the idea of point shooting and talk about dealing with flinches. Because I know last time when you were on my show, I'm pretty sure you noticed some flinching on my part. And I know there are a lot of people out there who suffer from this problem. So we'll kind of pick your brain about that when we come back.